Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Luka Hocevar, you got coffee. I got coffee. I know you're back getting used
All
to
is
the
good in
time
the
zone
world.
adjustment. Yeah, would love to believe that anyway. My good friend, the owner of Vigor Ground Fitness, and a ton of stuff that comes out of that. There are very few people that I look at the industry who make me just go, I do not know how I can squeeze more out of my time, but yet the stuff you do is inspiring. And certainly one of the fastest soaring brands in the industry, sought after, public speaker, you name it, right? So it wasn't that long ago, actually, I had you on an episode, at least a few episodes back, but that was the summer. I had a hiatus. Everybody who's been listening has probably figured that out by now. And a lot of stuff happened in that time frame. I spoke at your conference, you spoke at mine. We've been busy, and you lost your mom. I know that hit hard. There's been some other big things. You're expecting your first kid, which is crazy. A lot of change in your life. But I'm grateful to have you back, and I want to get you before things got crazier.
Yeah, I guess end of May is going to be D-Day to a certain degree. We'll see. I mean, as always, people are like, everything's going to change, which it definitely will. But my biggest thing is, not to travel as much, obviously, and really be more, I would say, intentional about what I say yes and no to. So my past has been a lot of yeses, which, hey, look, there's a time and a place for that. I think that, saying yes to a lot of things there's a season for that, and then there's a season for being a little more intentional. So once the baby comes end of May, I think we're gonna have a little bit of a different schedule, or Tia will kick my ass. So she'll probably listen to this and confirm.
Good. I know this kid is going to grow up to be either like WNBA, NBA. Like this kid is going to grow up with work ethic and just
There's gonna be,
genes.
listen, a lot of Ivan Drago montages happening.
People are going to be Googling, all right, who's that?
Yes, listen, go back, watch Rocky. Some of the best I would say training montages out of any movie is the I'm gonna blank on which Rocky that was.
That's four. That's
That's four,
four.
right? Yep. Yeah, I was pretty on point. But
I must break you.
yeah,
Dolph Lundgren, fantastic. All right, so that cues up the first thing I want to ask you about. So you and I, a lot of episodes going back. Anybody wants to check those out? There's a lot of career development stuff for the coach side of things, but this stuff is for the end user. So you are an athlete for life, quote. In your own training, your approach to training, that's something you branded around. What does it mean being an athlete for life? And I want to go into the movement skills. What are the movement skills as we get older that decline faster than older adults? They typically avoid, but we need to actually train.
yeah. I mean, the athlete for life part of it is interesting because it's a way that once I got done with my basketball career, I was obviously extremely into training. That's what led me to, I would say, this industry. But the way that I trained was to a degree, it still had aspects of what other people would consider like, because people say, hey, like, why are you still training like an athlete? Like even, I was a coach, I was coaching a lot, and we've talked about that before, right? Where I was doing like crazy hours. But if you saw me in the gym, I'm lifting weights, but you'd see me hooping in the evenings. You're seeing me do plyometrics. If I get an opportunity to be outside, I'm doing sprints. Even back when I was at LA Fitness, I'm doing sprints down the hallway, and people are like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And it was really to never kind of lose the athleticism. Now I'm 43 years old now. I post quite a few of my training sessions and obviously share a lot of this philosophy. And I just never, this idea that if I looked, great, but I couldn't do stuff is very foreign to me, or should I say, would annoy me, right? Like, oh man, like I look great, but I can't just take off and sprint. I can't go play, a 90-minute basketball pickup game. I can't go on a hike for 8 hours. I can't, jump on this box. It was, and again, this is just an individual kind of belief system. It's like I always want to feel like I can do stuff athletically. Right now, I would share stuff, and at this point in time too, I've been coaching for 20 years. And here's the connecting point, right? I get clients, and rarely has there ever been a client that would just say, "Hey, I want to get shredded, or I want to just lose weight," and that's it. Right? A lot of times it's like, "Well, I want to feel better." Right? People say, "I want to feel better. I want to, be able to do stuff." Okay, what do you want to be able to do? Oh man, like I want to be able to play with my kids. My kids do this, that, the other. I don't feel like I'm a role model in the family. So once you start kind of like peeling the onion, you realize like, yeah, people want to look better. They want to be able to perform better. Like they want to be stronger. But guess what? You ever had somebody like throw med balls against the wall, push prowlers, like they first of all, they love it and they start loving the feeling that they get when they can do shit. And I'm like quote me, or should I say quote this from some of the clients that I, was just training right before I went to see family in Slovenia was, a doctor that I trained at 63 years old. And he goes, man, like I never believed I could do the stuff that I'm doing right now. And he's like, there's stuff I'm doing right now that I couldn't do when I was in my 20s. He loves golfing too. And he's like, drives the ball further than he ever has in his life at 63. He can, trap bar deadlift 425. And it's one of these things that, what does all this stuff give you? And most people don't want just to be leaner. They want to be stronger. They want to be, obviously overplayed world is function, but let's just call it be able to do shit. Now, then you can go into, I would say the other side of it, which is the studies that show how much, what's the things that we lose the fastest. It's not muscle mass, it's not strength, it's power. Power and speed, rotational power is actually one of them that's up there. It's all these things that we stop doing, and then they affect us in very, very negative ways, right? And I'll just give an example of crazy stat that I think it's 1 out of 3 folks that fall that are older than 55 or 60 years old that break their hip. That's a crazy statistic, right? And that's basically, guess what? Reflexes, it's speed, it's power, it's agility, right? Being able to catch yourself, being able to have the coordination, and it affects your life, right? So if we talk about the quality of life, if you don't train speed and power and athleticism, it's going to affect the quality of your life. And I think that, folks will go like, well, but I'm, fill in the blank, but I'm 61 or I'm 58. Like, what will I need maximum sprints for? And it's like, look, there's a continuum, right? It's not like I'm probably more on the extreme where I'm like, hey, I'm going to be 45, but I still want to be jumping on a 50-inch box and, doing all these crazy things and whatnot. But there's the continuum. Like, for a lot of people, by the way, that start off things like agility ladders or skips, just running drills. That's kind of like their plyometrics for now, right? As you kind of work them up to more. But I'll tell you what, do you think if somebody does plyometric work, that walking is going to be a lot easier? Hell yeah, right? You think if somebody does, for example, pogo jumps and walking lunges, that then like a walk is going to be like very easy for them? You best believe it, right? And so that's where kind of like this idea it came from. Hey, I don't want to lose my athleticism. I want to feel athletic for life. That's where, from my own personal kind of training perspective. And then I've coached, over 4,000 people in some setting myself. Between the two gyms, we've coached, almost 13,000 between the Slovenian one and the Seattle one. And we've seen this pattern where it's like we're coaching folks from obviously from youth to, our oldest client right now, and is 78, and just kicking ass. And guess what? She got hit by a car, broke a whole bunch of stuff. Doctor was like, man, I can't believe that. Like you're able to get back to stuff. I can't believe how well you're recovering. And guess what? Strength training, athletic training was what was the foundation to help her do that. And then she's back in the gym now. I mean, there's no way, but they're like, man, this is like one in a, in 100 situation. But again, her training prepared her to be able to come back to it. And now, guess what? The quality of life of somebody else would have declined dramatically, right? But her physical preparedness, athleticism, and now getting back to it, is continuing her quality of life into her, older age. And that's to me, kind of this philosophy of athlete for life, on a physical aspect of it, right? It's like all these different properties that athletes would have, right? You wouldn't just say, hey, this guy plays in NFL, and you're like, what does he need to work on? You wouldn't just say, oh, he needs to get strong or he needs to get leaner. Man, it's like you need what? Everything from spatial recognition to stability to awareness to proprioception to speed to power to deceleration to, yada, 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 right? Like all these different aspects of it. So, plugging some of those in for clients that are going to transfer over to their life, which when you think about it, is just, you need all this shit in every day, regardless of whether you're going to go play pickup basketball or, or flag football, whatever else it may be.
And we think, hey, oh, this is stuff for quote older people. I took a fall on the stairs in April last year and sprained my ACL. Now, socks and carpet stairs is a bad combo. Apparently, anecdotally, they find a lot of people dead at the bottom of stairs wearing socks. But I'll be 47 in March. And that was a little bit of a wake up. And that knee limited me in some of the stuff I could do. It's still not 100%, but it's really good. And I'm like, well, shit. And if that could happen to me, it woke me up to go, man, I gotta not like, I still like run up and down stairs like a kid. Okay, maybe that's not the smartest thing in the world on carpet stairs. Okay, so I adjusted that, but it's also like, okay, I did fall. My leg got buckled under me. I'm a heavy dude, so just bad combination of stuff. But I mean, that stuff can happen. I'm not bulletproof anymore. When it comes to falls, so a few things. One is, as you said, if you're strength training, your balance, agility, all these sort of things are better. Bone mineral density is better. One, you're less likely to fall, right? Two, you're less likely to break something serious when you fall. And I don't know the exact statistic, but people who past the age of about 60 who suffer a femur or a hip fracture. Actually, some of those people just straight up die from the fall. Like there's a lot of deaths from those
Yep.
falls. But then there's another very significant percentage of those people that over the next year they die because you see a dramatic
Yes,
decline in their
huge,
activity
huge.
level, their metabolic health tanks, their mental health tanks because all of a sudden you've lost access to getting out into social environments and community and all these sort of things. So there are massive negative cascading potential effects, and you dramatically mitigate the likelihood of this happening with regular strength training.
Well, and here's the thing, man. Like, I mean, look, the way I look at it is a lot of people that come in don't even think about that. Meaning, if a person comes in and they say, "Hey, look, I want to lose weight. I want to look better. I want to feel better. I want to feel more capable." They don't know, what they should be doing, or a lot of times there's limiting beliefs around things like jumping, throwing. Like it's like, what I shouldn't be able to do that. That's not. So you got to kind of slowly sprinkle stuff in for a lot of folks. For some, it's you can plug it right away. But because I do want to talk a little bit just about on the programming side, I think sometimes folks will say, how do I, how do I even put this in? Like, what does my program look like? Like, where do you put this in? Because it's not like you're overhauling, I think this idea of like, oh, I watched, this pro athlete's workout, it's going to look like that. It's like, no, like what you start doing. And I love the R7 model, right? For anybody that's followed Mike Robertson, kind of a quick recap. R7 is like a filter on how to look at your training, right? It's very malleable, by the way, but the seven R's, I'll go through them real quick. R1's release, right? That's your soft tissue work, your foam rolling, your lacrosse balls, or anything that's going to kind of, consider soft tissue work. R2 is a reset. And we could get really geeky here, but resets are, you can have a neurological reset. A lot of times for me, this is like positional breathing. Either, getting your joints into a better kind of position, right? But it's also, for example, somebody that comes in extremely stressed out, which is most people, if you give them box breathing drills or positional breathing drills, it's just going to bring their nervous system down a little bit, right? So they're not as sympathetic, not parasympathetic. Just get them to kind of baseline, more chill, right? So that's a reset. And we'll usually do like, one exercise in as a reset, most likely because of the time we have. R3 is readiness. Readiness just means dynamic warm-ups. That's the easy explanation of it, right? Whatever anybody considers dynamic warm-ups. R4 is reactive. So that's your speed, your power, your agility, your quickness, all these different things. R5 is resistance. So that's your strength training. Although I like to categorize it strength and resistance training, right? To me, strength training is trying to get stronger. Resistance training is, hey, like I might be building tendons, muscle building, right? All types of different properties there. And then R6 is resilience, which is your conditioning. R7 is recovery, which might be like a cool down. And imagine like that being a piece of the pie, right? Like there's a piece of the pie, and that pie is split up into R1, R2, R3, so on and so forth. Like the reason why I like giving analogies like this is because somebody that's a bit like a beginner, their training session, half of it might be R3, like warm-ups, but that's going to be training for them. Like if you've ever had a person that goes like, hey, I haven't, trained in a really long time, or I've never actually exercised, in an organized way, and you make them do a squat to stand, and you make them do a Spider-Man lunge, right, with rotation, and you make them do an inchworm. I mean, think about this. Do 5, 6 reps of that in a circuit back to back. Like we'd be like, oh, that's a good warm up, like good exercise for warm up. For that person, their heart rate's high, like their muscles are fatigued, like that's working out.
That's
So
progressive for them.
correct, exactly. So like you have to look at that piece of the pie. R3 is gonna be maybe a lot of the workout, and then you're gonna have maybe three exercises of resistance. That's it for two sets, and that's gonna be plenty. And guess what? Even for that person, and this is where kind of like the athleticism comes in, that R3, right? After the warm-ups, we might give them like, by the way, and I'll take an example of an older lady that we had come in that we had her in a half kneeling position, and the coach would roll the med ball, Dynaball to her, and then she'd throw it as hard as possible. Now, to you, it might not look like some crazy power, but to her, it was. And she was doing half kneeling, chest throws, power stuff. She was doing slams. I had just had a person that I was throwing cards to, right? Because if you throw a card in the air, it kind of goes, in a wacky ways. And it was some hand-eye coordination and like reflexes. So it's just like catching the cards, boom, boom, right? So it was that and foot fire. And again, foot fire didn't look fast probably to, the average person, but to them, they were working hard and fast, faster than what they were used to, right? So that looks like that for them. But for you, Andrew, again, R3 might be like, hey, listen, after we get done with our dynamic warmups, which will already have some running drills, some skips, some hops, right? Some karaoke and all these different things in there, right? We're going to go, hey, listen, I'm going to have you do a med ball broad jump throw, right? So you're going to throw and then basically jump into broad jump, right? It might be a box jump. So it's going to be, again, usually for most people might be a upper body power and a lower body power, right? But that whole point of like, hey, look, this is looking different for different people, but we're plugging in that R4 reactive, right? And that's why I love that filter, because every session is going to have a component of it. But again, you could say, well, I got this off season, I got a whole bunch of NFL guys again. Yeah, that's going to look different than Tim. That's like, hey, he wants to get better, be more athletic, feel better, but be better for golf and, for instance, for soccer. And so there's different levels to it, but the whole point of it is like you start somebody and you progress them. And I got folks that again started with us 6 years ago that would literally say, look at another client and go like, oh man, like, I'll never be doing that. And like 4 years later, they're 72 and they're jumping on a 30-inch box. They're throwing a med ball high in the air. They're sprinting, like legit sprinting. On one of my Instagram reels, such a cool. I videoed it because it was so cool because it was like, dad, his wife, and then basically his son, and I had him doing like these sprints, and the dad's 63, Rose is 50, and the son's like 24, right? And they're all sprinting, and like it looks like sprinting. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
it doesn't. It's like they're punching, and they've been training here for years. So at the beginning, there's no way it would look like that, but it's like legit 63, like just doing shuttle sprints on the turf, right? 50, doing shuttle sprints on the turf, and I was like, man, this is so cool. And but again, if I shot the first video of Phil doing a sprint per se, it didn't look like a sprint. We started more with sleds because you don't want to start somebody that hasn't sprinted to just start sprinting, right? My point being, there's a continuum for all this, and you'd be blown away by how much you can build somebody up little by little, strategically putting in things that will develop those tissues, right? Because again, one thing is to obviously develop properties like speed and power and so on, but also develop those tissues so they're resilient so that you don't get injured, right? Because if you just go from nothing to sprinting all out, like you're probably gonna have an issue.
That's important. Load management, right? It's gradually titrating in exposure to not just like strength-based loads, but also the ranges of motion you put yourself in. I'll give you guys a quick example. It's a bit more like kind of bodybuilding-esque. Let's say you're pretty used to doing just a standing dumbbell curl. And then all of a sudden, that's the only thing you've been doing for a while. And you go sit on a preach curl machine. Now you're strong, you got big biceps, but you put your arm in a slightly different position. And then all of a sudden, you just load that thing heavy and fully extend. Guess what? The tendons, your joint is not used to being in that position, especially under heavy load. So you actually want to graduate your exposure to that. Real quick, you mentioned a lot of these things. For my older adults, especially, some of my favorite tools that are pretty actually low impact, but amazing for power, speed. You said sleds. they're incredible for that. Med ball throwing, slamming, etc. You can get older adults generating crazy power. Sledgehammer. We got a sledgehammer to tire at Evolve.
Yes.
And like Larry's like 74. And Larry, you can hear that hammer hitting the tire all the way across the gym. Larry gets power behind that. And kettlebell swings, one of my favorite things. Okay, real quick. Why is it important we do the speed and power stuff before the strength training stuff?
I mean, a couple of things, right? Like one, let's just zoom out and say you're fresh, right? So you'd want to work on things that are the most neurologically demanding first, right? Now, look, this is kind of like there's if you understand the rules, you can break the rules. We can talk about that as well. But and then also like working on things that you want to improve on the most. You wouldn't, be extremely fatigued and then try to work on top speed because you won't be able to achieve it, right? Same thing. It's like, if you're very fatigued, it's going to be more difficult to work on power. Now, I think there's another aspect of it. I actually like, Joe Ken, very well-known strength coach, legendary strength coach, and he talks about doing power work at the end, which I like actually doing. And that's the mentality of the athlete. It's like, hey, you're going to get into the fourth quarter, you're still going to have to produce power. And look, that's a whole nother aspect. But in general, right, like you want to basically, first of all, you want to be very thoroughly warmed up, right? That's why the importance of dynamic warm-ups and progressing dynamic warm-ups. If you look at in our gym, not just for myself, the end of a warm-up is always gonna, it's kind of you go from simple to complex. You go from, I would say, ground-based to standing. You go from slow to fast, right? So towards the end of the warm-ups, you have the more demanding stuff, get the nervous system going. You're going to see a lot of things like skips, jumps, hops, things like that, right? I say this because I can't tell you the amount of people that will go and do power speed, jumps and throws before they had a quality warm up, and then they tweak something, right? So that's why I share this. But first of all, you're fresh. Again, most neurologically demanding things, you want to do them first so you can actually develop those things. Like that's the thing about, power and speed. You can't half-ass it, right? Like you have to go intent, intent is all out, which is, by the way, I love this even with general population folks. Like we'll have things like, we have the force plates, output monitors, right? So if you do, for example, if I do a clean pull or a trap bar deadlift jump, right? Where people can see numbers. By the way, it's visually, right? They see like, hey, look, you're moving this at 1.2 meters per second. Hey, let's try to get 1.4, right? They have something that they can actually see. Because that's the thing about, speed and power. Sometimes it's a feeling, right? But if you start timing it, Mike Boyle does this a lot with Gen Pop too, right? Where it's like flying tens. We have I'll say speed traps inside of Vigor as well, where it's like now we can time, your tens and we can time your sled tens. But you know why that's cool? Because then that person is like, oh shit, I'm getting faster, right? Because again, for a lot of times it's like, hey, do you feel more explosive? Yeah. But it's cool to see if you are more explosive. And simple things, for Gen Pop is also how far are you going to throw this med ball? Right? It's like we're measuring the med ball throws because everybody likes to know that they're getting better. Hey, I'm getting more powerful. I'm getting faster. Obviously, things like box jumps, I'm jumping higher, right? And but that's the main reason, right? We want to put that in there because when you're freshest, like you want to develop those abilities and skills. It makes the most sense. Now, I do feel for the purpose of also smart program design, I love contrast training, which is basically where you pair, for instance, a strength exercise with a power and or plyometric exercise. So an easy one that you'll see us do all the time is like a trap bar deadlift. Let's say we're doing it for a heavy three, challenging three, and then we're going to do a box jump, right? Or a scoop toss or a broad jump or something like that, right? So you do the lift, wait 20 seconds, go do the jump, and then have a full rest break. And, if you look at French contrast and contrast training, it's been used a ton with athletes. And some folks would sometimes go like, oh, like, but that's to peak and stuff like that. But I think it's so effective in using it in training sessions because it saves you time, but still works on those things, right? Because there's something called PAP, which is post-activation potentiation, right? So essentially imagine that, and you can go either way, but like you lift a heavy weight, a lot of those high threshold motor units engage, and then those are engaged, and then like 15, 20 seconds later, you do something explosive. And a lot of times you might be able to, actually jump further or higher, whatever it may be. But for the general pop, I also love it because you're actually cutting minutes down out of a workout, right? So imagine if you did 3 to 4 sets of box jumps in and of itself, had a full rest break, and then later did, 3 to 4 sets of trap bar deadlift and had a full rest break. Like it's going to take significantly longer than if you go trap bar deadlift, 20-second break, do your jumps, full rest break, right? You're probably cutting out like about 4 minutes out of a training session, maybe even more. And, time is, is very important when you're training folks because you only have so much of it, right? Nobody's coming in and like, hey, I got an hour and a half, an hour, 45 minutes to train with you. No, like you got an hour, right? And you got to do warm ups, this, that, the other. So we're being effective with it, but that's a really, really good use of a training method to also, throw in athletic things, right? And by the way, people that have never done that, like they don't know what that means, but they love it. Like I've yet to see a client, it doesn't matter what goal, what age, when we're like, hey, look, we're gonna do these lifts, these deadlifts, and then you're gonna go grab this ball. And I want you to throw the shit out of it, like try to touch the ceiling with it, right? People have fun with it, right? No one's like, oh, why the hell are we doing this? And if you start taking it out, they're like, hey, I want that back in. I want to be throwing shit. I want to be jumping. I want to be doing stuff.
You said something earlier in there that's really important to highlight, and Joel Jameson does a great job with this stuff, is the maintaining skill under fatigue. So I'll just shout out Joel, his certified conditioning coach course for the coaches listening would be a killer one for that. Because his sort of come up in history is a lot of MMA fighters, amongst other things. And, as you alluded to in sport, sorry, I'm losing my voice today. There we go. You need to maintain these skills in the fourth quarter through the entire fight. Right? So you have to train the ability to maintain skill, body position, et cetera, as best you can under fatigue. Let's pivot. Okay, so we alluded to some of this stuff, and you and I have talked so much career success over the years. Like I said, tons of old episodes. But this one's a bit different. Um, like I said, you lost your mom recently. Parkinson's. Parkinson's is a thing in your life, in your family. And I know this stuff is just crazy crushing. How does your own lifestyle influence your risk? And you can talk it from a personal standpoint and your approach to it, but also for everybody.
Well, one of the things that I mean, this has been a challenging year. I think that might be another episode in of itself.
Hmm.
Like the whole year has been an absolute roller coaster. With obviously one of the most challenging things with the health of my family with the whole year, and then my mom passing, almost a month ago now, and they, it's also seeing because both of my parents, have Parkinson's and with very, very different symptoms and also very different, I'd say the approaches. And what I mean by approaches, like, my dad is threw himself pretty hard into fitness, and, doing as much as possible around physical activity and also mental activity. My mom, not as much. And we can kind of chat about that a little bit more, but, it made me basically, when I was doing my labs for Merrick, which I try to do, kind of at least every 6 months ish. I said, hey, can you check for if I have this gene? It's called the EPO2 gene, which is basically the Alzheimer's slash Parkinson's gene, which I have, and then when it popped up, it's like, hey, what are the things that, you know, you can do to keep it at bay? Or, what are the pre-active things that you can do? And I mean, strength training is on the top of the list. Or should I say everything that we just talked about, not just strength training, but performance training as well. And I mean, there's so much studies around this. I mean, you could just, you could literally just Google it. But a lot of the research shows around progressive resistance training, improving bradykinesia, motor symptoms, and functional performance in Parkinson's patients. And look, there's the studies, which by the way, please dig into them because I think they support I would say strength training hardcore. I've seen it in my own life with my parents, right? Like sometimes almost like the tale of two cities in a sense, where my dad has had, obviously quite a lot of struggles with this, and then he had cancer surgery last year as well on top of that. And but when the doctors, he was pretty diligent. Right now, he's had about a 4 month break and getting back into it, but for years, strength training twice a week at Vigor, with a coach, right? At the Slovenian Vigor, that is, right? The one in Slovenia that we have. Being like going for on every Wednesday, going for like a 10-mile walk with his friends, right? Being very active and going out, also reading a lot. And, the doctors were like, hey, like, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, man, like you got to keep doing it. Because what you'll also see in a lot of the studies is essentially, and by the way, high intensity resistance training is specifically, right, shows a lot more promise as well. So meaning not just we talk about stretching and doing light cardio and things of that nature, right? So, but by the way, it's not strength or conditioning; it's strength and conditioning, right? So both components are very important here, by the way, because Parkinson's, you're looking at that it has to do with the brain. So oxygenation of the brain, and when you're looking at like improving your cardio, that has a whole slew of other benefits as well, right? So it's not one or the other, it's both. And then when you look into it, because my dad was boxing consistently once a week. So think hand-eye coordination, speed, and agility. And there's tons of, by the way, please do the research. We don't have enough time for me to give you all the links on here, but has a ton of positive, I would say, research behind it as well. So meaning strength and conditioning, right? But also athleticism, hand-eye coordination. And it pretty much, to a degree, the doctors like, hey, like, this is slowed it down to almost like a pause, right?
There's something
Yeah, go
here,
ahead.
and I want to frame it a specific way. You're building reserve. So, and you mentioned cancer in there too. This is the way I want people to think about this. You're building muscle reserve, you're building movement reserve, you're building skill reserve. And when we deal with progressive diseases, neurological, something like cancer, et cetera, especially with cancer, with invasive treatments like radiation or chemo, these things are wasting, right? It's hard to get food down, et cetera. The more muscle reserve you have in a situation like that, that's actually a key feature in surviving cancer. And when it comes to movement-based stuff, neurological stuff, the more motor skill you maintain and possess, the stronger that your nervous system is, the more reserve you have against this gradual progressive decline that happens, the more you're fighting it. So if you guys think about in terms of developing and maintaining your reserves as you get older, and you have to start, the earlier you start, the better it is.
Absolutely. And it's like, I mean, look, the funny joke, right? Like, I mean, when I say the funny joke, but be harder to kill, right? It's like, why do you train? Be harder to kill. I mean, there's truth to that in the sense of like diseases, having a harder time killing you legitimately, right? And by the way, like, there's two, like, you see all these memes and all these like quick quotables, and I think they're helpful sometimes just as far as like remembering things, but to say, hey, like cardio helps you live longer, right? Longevity wise, and strength training and performance training help you live better. And I think, look, if that's something that's memorable for you, I think it's a good way to look at it. There's a lot of things that help you improve your health. And I think it's very important to, what's called look under the hood. That and now I would say a lot of the blood work is so affordable, whether it's my friend Dr. Andy Galpin's Vitality Blueprint, or if it's Merrick Health, stuff that used to be really, really, hard to access, or it was just really expensive. Now it's like for $500, you'll get 104 markers that kind of go like, hey, look, here's what's going on. Because you could have a big bench and a big deadlift and, look pretty damn good. But then you go do your blood work and it's like, whoa, maybe you need statins because it is genetic, and we have friends both that have done all the things right. And like, hey, you got to get on statins, right? But my point being is there are multiple components to health, right? But being like having enough muscle mass, bone density, being strong, being able to again do athletic things and having a good aerobic engine, which let's be real, that's kind of like the foundation for life. I mean, those things will not just like, hey, you're going to be in a better position if something does happen, but dude, like the quality of your life is so much better, right? And I always and this compounds as you get older, and this is why obviously Peter Attia stuff has exploded. This centenarian, right? Like, what's the last 10 years of your life going to look like, and start training for that right now, man. Like I think about that even now, right? And as we age, more people around us you see passing away or dealing with health issues, but it's like, what is your day like when you get up in the morning? How much energy do you have? What are you capable of doing? Whether it's you can work more focused and better and longer, and then spend time with your kids and then go do activities because you have that capability, right? Like there's just more life in your days. I think that's, a sell enough to be able to do this stuff, and just understand that you don't have to be, put as much time into it as maybe myself, right? It just means that, like, hey, start adding some of these components, because over time, just like money, just like anything else, it compounds, right? If you start doing, you know, 5 to 10 minutes of athletic plyometric stuff, um, 3 days a week, I mean, over time, guess what? Like that's going to add up. Just like if you just add a couple of these sets of this here, just, same thing I tell people, like you're stiff, your mobility sucks. I call it movement hygiene. It's one of the things that I started doing 15 years ago when I hurt my back like extremely bad, was every morning, 10 minutes of movement hygiene, just like you brush your teeth. I do movement hygiene. And it doesn't seem like a lot when you do 10 minutes, but you do that 7 days a week. After 30 days, you're like, holy shit, man, moving better. I'm feeling better. Like that little tweak that I had in my back and my hip, like I'm not feeling it anymore. All these things compound. It's not about, showing up and all of a sudden, you're doing a Lamar Jackson, training session at the gym or whatever it may be, right? Like it's, you're just putting little things in there and just building that foundation to be able to, carry over into your own life. Again, maybe you're 64 and you're like, hey, I don't give a shit about playing flag football, but I want to catch myself when I fall. Like I want to be able to, when my grandchild jumps into my arms, I want to be able to catch them and not tweak my back or be afraid that I'll tweak my back, right? Like I want to be able to do more stuff in life. To me, that's what athlete for life means, right? To be capable of doing things.
Now, I remember you saying something to me when we were talking about this probably well over a year ago about the you having the gene because of your lifestyle behavior, your commitment to training and everything and athleticism, you are at lower risk of developing Alzheimer's or Parkinson's than the average person walking around in society who doesn't have the gene. Is that true?
Yes, yes, because the thing is, when you look at, percentages, what ends up happening is that, like, I have quite a higher percentage risk, right? But even when I went through with James at Merrick at that point in time, he was like, "Hey, like you're pretty much doing." I mean, he's like, there's a couple of things. We had a list of things from supplementation to some lifestyle factors to improve, but he's like, "Man, like you're close to maxing out on that side of things, doing everything that you possibly can," which then, lowers your risk so dramatically that you're less likely than an average person to have issues with it, if that makes sense, right? My point being is that you have control, right? There's something called locus of control, right? Or spheres of control, which just comes down to, what do you focus on? Like, what are the things that you can affect that will actually change your life, your life, whether it's getting leaner, whether it's, not getting a certain disease that you might be more predisposed to, versus what you can't control. Right. And I think a lot of people get inside of their head and they're like, oh my God, it's my genes, it's this, it's that, I'm done for, or, there's nothing I can do about that. And now you're focusing on what you can't control, which becomes pretty, stressful and anxious, versus like, hey, what are these things that I can do? Man, my sleep's not great. I want to improve my sleep. What can I do about my nutrition? Hey, I'm not really doing a lot of, aerobic conditioning. I don't have a good foundation. Like these are all things you can address. Oh, wow. Like I could be adding in some more athletic movements into my training, right? And on it goes. And I think this is, part of what's really important for all of us, right? Like regardless of where we are, is the ability to be able to, shift from looking at things that you can't affect to look into the things that you can affect, right? Like we've got a couple of clients that just had pretty serious injuries from, again, things that they do outside of the gym and get really stressed out. And I'm like, hey, look, I know you had your surgery. Come in next week. Let's start training. And it's like, oh, well, but I can't do this. I'm like, all right, let's on the whiteboard. I'm like, let's write down everything that you can do. And we start writing it down. We start writing it down. It's like this massive list. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, man, I can do a lot of stuff. I'm like, absolutely you can, right? And as soon as we can shift their focus on what they can do, they feel empowered, right? The moment it's like, and by the way, I think this was a Mike Bowl quote, but I got a couple of clients that had knee injuries, right? And I'm like, 80% plus of you is fine, right? Like this is, we can train 85% of you, and then, the 15% you're going to be rehabbing it. but we can actually train the hell out of the 80. And that shift was like, whoa, hold up. Okay, like actually, I can, yeah, like we can actually PR in a lot of this stuff that, while you're rehabbing your leg. And guess what? We have. And that's insanely empowering, right? Because it's so easy to go like, woe is me. And like, man, this is bad and I can't do this stuff. And I think it's important for anybody that's listening to this, again, or if you train or you coach clients, but to be able to show people the stuff that they can do. That's actually one of the things that we do as coaches.
I've got a resource if anybody's ever dealing with this. I built it a long time ago. I mean, I can't count the number of people I've trained with broken ankles and torn biceps and whatever, some sort of limb isn't working for a while. Anyway, so you work around the stuff. Then I got into the research and the research on cross education. Again, if you guys want to dig in and do the deep dive, but
Yeah.
message me, I'll give you the resource. Details a lot of the research on it, and it has programs on how to train upper body, lower body strength and conditioning if you have an injured limb. One of my old university buddies was just talking to him and he's torn his bicep. So I sent it to him right away. I can't count the number of people. They pop up, they got an injury. I sent it to them. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And this result, like the research is out there, but a dedicated trainer resource or anybody resource didn't exist. So I built it, had it published on Kabuki Strength. It's now available on my website. This thing's really good. All right, Luka. Um, everybody, I want them to go follow you. Everybody listening's fucking following Luka by this point. I wave you around on my media so damn much, but it's at Luka Hocevar. And you're one of the ones that didn't have to add fit or something else to your name. Your name's pretty unique, so you're lucky in there. There's like 50,000 Andrew coaches, I'm sure. What other resources do you want to share with people, especially on the athlete for life side?
I mean, the majority, I would say, of my content that where I share things of that nature is Instagram, right, which is at Luka Hocevar. And then YouTube, I got a lot of stuff on YouTube,
Yeah.
which same thing. If you just type in Luka Hocevar, Lukahocevar, I drop probably about 2 to 3 new videos per week. They're a little bit more longer form, right? So on YouTube, again, videos are more long form. I dive deeper into a whole bunch of topics. And then on my podcast, the Vigor Life podcast, which is basically, I would say really, really kind of digs into two different things, right? Fitness enthusiasts, we talk a lot about training stuff, but also just coaching and improving coaching. So if you're a coach, you're definitely going to love it. But also if you're a fitness enthusiast, we're kind of inching in close to 200 episodes. I was hoping I'd hit it this year, but it's gonna have to spill over into January. But yeah, there's if you type that stuff in, you'll get a ton of content around that. And never hesitate to reach out. If you go to lukahocevar.com, that's why I have a bunch of the courses and stuff, but I also have my an online training app where the Athlete for Life is the programming. So again, if you wanted to just dive into the programming, although I will say this, that specific program is for intermediate, not for beginners. Although I'm
Yeah.
launching a beginner one as well. But if you follow me, you'll kind of see, also the way that I program for myself and for clients, again, from all walks of life. And we have everybody from absolutely elite level athletes here to, folks just starting or folks in their 70s. And they'll give you an insight of how we train and how I program for those people to be an athlete for life.
And you respond to everything. You and me, we practice that. Like there's a lot of people, you message them, a lot of figures in industry, and that's it. Like I get it, boundaries and busy. That may change in May. We'll see what happens with the kid, right? But you're
We'll
good at
we'll we'll
responding.
see.
Yeah,
I
we'll
think.
see.
I mean, I think with what's going to happen is that like I'm just going to have to be a lot more effective and efficient with my time, which is what's already happening now. But again, it's you know, there's no bots. It's like me and Andrew. It's like actually us responding to stuff. If you DM me, if you DM him or comment, and I think that's an important aspect of it. I love this industry. I love coaching, and I think it's everything like that as an opportunity to help somebody out. Um, get a little more insight, get a little bit more knowledge that can then transfer to their own training. And to me, that's why we do content as well, right? It's like uh, being able to share the education so that it affects somebody in their own life.
And speaking of sharing, so obviously, everybody listening to this, thank you. If you found me through Lucas Media, go back and check out his old episodes, more coaching based stuff. You're gonna love that stuff. And if you enjoyed this conversation, obviously different, there may be someone in your world who's devoted to athleticism or trying to get in that world, someone who is staring down a battle with neurodegenerative disease or has a family member who does. If you like Luca's energy, his knowledge base, just share this episode with them. Get it in their DM. This is how you help me grow this. Go check out Luca's podcast. I've been listening to that for years. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. That's one of the few that I do, and I've been a guest on it too. So, Luca, thank you. It's a real pleasure as always.
My pleasure always, brother.